अभी हम हाइकिंग करके जल्दी से आ गए हैं क्योंकि टाइम हो रहा था हमारी बोट का। तो ये अंडरग्राउंड बोट है, केव है, तो केव में जिन माउंटेन से हम अभी आए हैं उनके नीचे जो है सारा खाली है और एक नदी बनी हुई है, केव है, उसके नीचे से बोट गुजरती है। ये हम इस तरह केव में से जा सकते हैं। असल में हम यहाँ जा रहे हैं, तो ये बोट जाएगी केव के अंदर से। देखते एडवेंचर है कैसा बनता है, तो साथ रखूँगा आपको मैं, लेकिन लाइट कम होगी। देखते हैं कि नीचे लाइट इनफ है कि नहीं वीडियो रिकॉर्डिंग के लिए, लेकिन आपको भी शेयर करूँगा।
Okay, so if you just wait a minute, I'm going to secure the boat up against the side, make sure it's not going to wobble around as you try and get on. So we're going that way, that's going to be the front over there. Is this one of those 360 here? I can see me. Subscribe. So, you might have a few questions, the main one being, what the heck am I doing floating down a dark tunnel with a stranger who clearly doesn't know how to drive a boat and is facing the wrong direction? That is a fantastic question, but unfortunately, legally, I'm not allowed to answer it. So, I'm just going to skip straight over. Welcome to Speedwell Cavern. Now, we're currently floating down what used to be an underground canal system back in the 18th century. This tunnel was built by 18th century miners who are, if you don't know, people who dig underground for a living. Now these miners were from the local village of Castleton, and they'd be down here 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a few hours off on a Sunday to go to church. For all of their hard work, they'd be getting paid a grand total of about 5 pence a week. Wow. Yeah. In nowadays money, that is more like £5 a week. Still more than we get paid as tour guides, but there you go. Wow, thanks for Now coming up on your left hand side, you'll see there is a small hole in the rock. And this hole was once actually full of lead. It's a natural vein of lead is what we call it. And it was actually mined out by a 7-year-old boy named Winston, giving it the name the Little Winston Vein. Now it's just an empty tunnel that goes on for about 37 metres, and you'll see that on your left. Just in there.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Wow. He was on his hands and knees with a pickaxe in one hand, a shovel in the other, and a bucket around his neck. He had a candle bitten between his teeth so that he could see. It wasn't a normal wax candle that you'd have at home though. It was a candle made of something called tallow, Now, tallow is a horrible mixture of animal fats and fire ash. It's also what they use in McDonald's burgers these days. Don't fact check on that last part, I don't want to get sued. So, because we're not very busy today, we are the only group of people down here. And I know that's not really the most reassuring thing you can hear. But don't worry, we're in safe hands. It's actually quite a good thing that there's no one else down here, because it means we don't have to figure out a way to get past them. If you haven't noticed, the walls are pretty narrow. And the boat does take up the entire tunnel. So what happens when two boats meet going in opposite directions? Any ideas?
Climb from one to the other.
Climb from one to the other, sink, always good options. We always get those ones quite a lot. But we actually just pull into a little passing place that was built by the miners and named the Halfway House. Now this passing place, do you want to take a guess why they might have called it the Halfway House? It's for the simple and plain fact that it's exactly a third of the way down the tunnel. Wait a minute. That doesn't quite make sense, does it? We are actually a third of the way down the tunnel. But it's not called the Halfway House because of its position in the tunnel. It's called the Halfway House because this is actually where the miners would come to get drunk, and they named it after their favourite pub. Now they did this because they were told the cure for lead poisoning was beer. I can tell you that the tour guides, after a lot of research, we figured out that that is not the case. The miners did just become alcoholics. Turns out the doctor that they met in the pub that told them this was actually the landlord. So it's quite a biased opinion there. And that's the little passing place, the Halfway House, where they would have kept tools, alcohol, pretty much anything else really they want to keep like that. Now in a moment, we'll float underneath some bricks. Feel free to reach around and touch these bricks when you see them. You'll know when you see them. They might feel a little different to the rock around. They might feel a bit slimy, a bit more damp. You might even get dripped on, and that's completely normal, don't worry. Yeah, there you go. So that's because you've actually just touched the foundations to the gents' toilets. Feel free to wipe your hands on the people next to you. I am, of course, just joking. We're nearly 150 metres below the surface. I'd be quite surprised if the gents' toilets came down this far. That is actually just a brick wall. There's not much I can say to make that sound any cooler than it is, so why don't we give it a round of applause, just so you know, make it feel included, yeah? Thanks guys, you really made the brick wall feel better there, yeah. Now behind that brick wall, there is actually something a little bit more interesting. There's actually an abandoned pirate ship there. It's not that cool. It's actually just a tunnel, and it goes all the way to the surface, and you can actually go and find the other end of it at the surface. And it's bricked up because it basically stops soil and debris falling on our heads. But it's not just soil and debris that we have to worry about. You see, we're directly below farmland, and there was once a sheep up there that got a little bit too curious, and it made its way down into the tunnel and got stuck behind the bricks at this end. There was a tour guide coming along the tunnel doing his tour, and suddenly from behind the bricks he hears a sheep noise. So he stopped the boat, had a look through a crack in the bricks, and saw an eye staring back at him. That's not something you want to see when you're down in cave. So we had to unbrick the wall, get the sheep into a boat, or at least that's one story. Depending on which tour guide you have, you'll hear a different thing. Some tour guides like to say the sheep was taken back to the surface and was happily running around in the fields. Other tour guides like to say the sheep was just fine with some mint sauce. But one tour guide in particular likes to tell the story that the sheep was in there for so long that it began to feed off members of the public, evolving into an 8-foot monster called Sheepzilla. So I'm going to give you guys the option, because I'm the nicest tour guide. Whatever you want to believe, it's up to you. Those are the three kind of options. Anyway, went on a bit of a weird tangent there. If you look in the roof, you'll see there are lots of cylindrical grooves. And these cylindrical grooves are called blast holes. They're how the miners would dig the tunnel. They would chisel 14 little holes into the rock at a time, fill them with a cheap alternative to gunpowder called black powder, They'd fill them up with clay and then light a straw fuse. This straw fuse would give them about 30 seconds before it blew up. So they were pretty much turning the stone into a gun and standing right in front of them. An inherently terrible idea. So they had to run in 30 seconds as fast as they could, as far as they could, to avoid these explosions. As you can imagine, it's a pretty difficult task. This was a problem from the very beginning. People were getting injured every single day, barely escaping with their lives, and very often not escaping with their lives at all. They would tragically lose a lot of people. The miners one day decided to ask the person running the tunnel, nearly went into the wall then. The person running the tunnel, if they could have 2 weeks of paid work to build themselves a safety hole. And this was basically going to be another halfway house, somewhere they could hide from these explosions. But their boss only gave them 2 days of unpaid work. Just on your left hand side here, you'll see they dug this by hand using pickaxes. This had to fit 5 fully grown men, all of their tools, and a few children. It's not ideal. More of a safety ditch, really. Now, they decided that they were going to go behind their boss's back, lie to him, and build themselves another safety hole without his permission. And that's exactly what they did. Now this one, once again, you'll see on the left. It's actually got no lights in there today, but we like to make the joke that it is home to Derbyshire's smallest and only beach. And I just realised that joke's not going to work because there's no lights in it and you can't see. So there you go, there's my day ruined. You'll see in a moment, it's just kind of a scary black void. You can reach into it if you want. You'll see. There you go. And that was a little bit better. They'd be using that to shelter themselves from these explosions. Unfortunately, their boss did eventually find out. And when he found out, he was so angry that he actually fired them all on the spot. A new group of miners from Castleton were brought up here. They needed the money, so they came down here and they started mining. And they dug in here for a couple of months before breaking through into the first lead mine of 2. The reason they were digging this tunnel was to connect these lead mines with an underground canal. The miners from these mines would pay a small price to get on the boat and go along the tunnel. And this is the first lead mine. This is a natural cavern, as you'll see. It's quite big, so you can put your hard hats up in there if you want to. There's nothing you can bump your head on, but please don't take that as a competition. When we get to the end, there might be a little bit of a bump. You might call it crashing. I've always preferred the term improvised stopping. I'll try and slow it down as much as I can. And we'll hop off the boat, have a walk around, and I'll let you do your own thing for a bit. We'll hop back in and head back. Does that sound okay? Good stuff. Okay, hold tight. As you can see, this is going to be intense. We are moving insane speeds today. Scary. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just secure the boat, make sure it's nice and safe before you get off. It is quite technical though, so bear with me. Okay, the boat's secure, you can get off. You need a hand with the engine? You've got it. came to have a boat ride, they immediately said yes. It was so much easier. And that's exactly what happened. They pay a few pence to get on the boat and go back to the surface. The tunnel does carry on for about 260 metres that way. And then expanded to 14 miles before the system, tunnel, cavern mine, and people from all over there, mines from all over there, would come, use the boat. It would be very, very comfortable for the owner. Now, over that road, if you have to go over here or you see there is a lake down there. That lake is known as the Watermelon Pit. But I can tell you more about that on the way back. It's a very long story, so you'll just have to wait and see what that's about. But for a long time, that was believed to be a bottomless pit. Slightly to the horizon just off over there, you'll see stalactites. Now, stalactites are formed when water breaks down. It seemingly never filled up. They came to the only logical conclusion they could. This was bottomless pit, and the rock from the course was sinking forever. All of the locals began to tell stories about how it was a portal to a hell, or a gateway to another plane of existence. And then my boss's grandfather, who lived in Castleton, heard about it. And he decided he was going to buy this bottom. He thought he could make some serious money out of it. But before he invested his life savings into a cabin, he wanted to make sure that it was actually bottomless. So he got the longest piece of rope he could find, and he tied a weight to the end of it. The plan was to dangle the weight into the water on this rope after going out on a boat onto the bottomless pit. He was dangling it in and waiting for the weight to hit the bottom of the pit. He was dangling it in and dangling it in and dangling it in and dangling it in, and it seemingly went on forever, never hitting the bottom, until eventually, after about half an hour, he ran out of rope to dangle in. And he thought, that's proof enough for me. It's bottomless. I'm going to buy this cavern. And he bought it, opened it to the public, and began advertising the world's first bottomless pit. Things were going well a few weeks later. And he sat there thinking, you know what, maybe I should just double check. Maybe, just to make sure, I'll get someone down to measure it, because actually I feel terrible lying to people. So, you got a speedologist, a cave scientist, to come down to the cavern and actually measure the depth of water with some science. And I can tell you, it's pretty much what you expect, thank you for coming to Speedwell Cavern today, guys. I hope you've had a fantastic time if you've had. Just so guys to be back. But if you haven't, and this is the really important part, if you hate it, you're going to leave a horrible review about it. I've been Jacob. Thanks for coming, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Get home safe. No problem. I hope we've all still got great self-satisfaction. Coming off. I didn't think the hard hats were a bit overkill, but they're not. Yeah, you think that at first. Yeah. They're really not. So all you do is just secure the boat. There might be a little bit of a gap in between the platform and the boat. So you just step over it, don't go down. Okay. So, in the nicest way possible, get lost. Thanks for coming, guys. Have a great day. Thank you. No problem. Thank you. See you later. Bye.
आपको स्टोरी सुनी सारी जितनी भी ये केव कैसे बनी, ये नेचुरल थी। यहाँ से ऐसे लोग आते थे पहले ऊपर से, जो मैंने आपको दिखाया सारा नेचुरल था। लेकिन जो टनल बनी थी, टनल जो है खुद बनाई थी, लेकिन बाकी सारा नेचुरल था। ये तो आगे चलते हैं, मेरा एंजॉय क्या होगा, चलते हैं आगे।
बैग ना ले।
I'll bring down my ticket.
What's your name?
Discount.
Thank you.
There we go.